Hey folks, and welcome to They Might Be Racing. Today I've broken one of my rules and I have a Honda back in the shop. So what we're going to be doing today is replacing the water pump on a 1995 Honda Accord with the 4-cylinder vtec motor. In addition to this, when you replace the water pump, you also want to replace the timing belts. And because of the amount of stuff that needs to be removed to do this job, for starters, it's not for the uninitiated, but secondly, it's a good opportunity to take a look at a lot of the componentry around the engine to make sure it's all in good shape. So if you'll take a look down here, basically speaking, the water pump is in back behind this, behind all the timing equipment. So to get in there, to get to the water pump, number one, you have to disconnect the power steering, remove the belt and actually shift the power steering out of the way. You will need to remove the alternator and get that out of the way. Down underneath the vehicle, you'll need to remove the splash shields and the wheel shield. We'll show you that in more detail later. But and then at a certain point, you're going to need to remove the crankshaft pulley, jack up the engine itself, disconnect the motor mount so we can get in there and get everything off. So as I said, this is not necessarily what I'd call a simple job. Now what we've done already is we got the car up in the air. It's appropriately jacked up on stands at its jack points. In addition to that, we've already drained the coolant. There's a little petcock down at the bottom of the radiator on this side that you just need to loosen. Make sure you have the proper drain pan underneath it. And we have disconnected the negative battery cable. So basically all the safety stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get all the belts off the car. Now to do that, number one is to loosen this, slip the belt off, and then number two is to loosen the alternator and slip the belt off. So because this is going to be an extensive bit of work to do this, to get it all into the YouTube format, I'm going to do a bunch of the work, show you what I've done, and then we'll sort of repeat, rinse, lather, and repeat as we go through. So right now I'm going to take these two out and get the belts off. Okay, so the first thing we did is we went through and removed all the belts. So here we've got the power steering. We've got it completely loose of the engine. But what you do is that this is the tensioner here. You slack that off until you can remove the bolt. And then this bolt gets removed from this side. And when you get down below, there is a nut that gets removed from this side. And once those are loose, you can take your power steering off. Now, if you come around here, this is where the alternator was. So this is the way the alternator is positioned in the vehicle. We've got cables coming across you need to remove. There's a bolt here that you release, and then there's a snap-in plug right there. Now, to get this thing out, underneath the alternator, here is the tensioner. It's a 10mm bolt. You slack off the tension, but the alternator won't move. This bolt here, which is 12mm, you have to loosen this nut, and it's a bit of a reach to get down into here to where the mounting is, and then loosen the upper bolt, which goes across in through here. That's 14mm. The alternator will swing down. You can pull the belt off. Now the fun part is to get this out of the vehicle, you have to completely remove this tensioner bolt, remove this bolt, swing it forward, and then you can slide the lower bolt out. So it's a bit of fun to get in there. Now, beyond that, what we had to do to get ready is to get the underpinnings removed from the vehicle. So, to start with, there is the splash shield. There's a number of bolts around the splash shield. You remove those, it drops right out, and then you have much easier access to the underside of the vehicle. So now that we've got the extraneous bits from the top and bottom removed, the next step is to get top dead center. Now, it's a little bit tricky to see, but if you look down on the crank pulley, you'll see a number of notches on it. And you'll see a point, this V shape where you do your alignment. So here we are aligned at top dead center. There's one marker there. There's 3 additional timing ones. Now to double check, here's the way to double check. Over on the far side of the engine here is your distributor. Your distributor the rotor should point to number 1 cylinder. So if this were in the car, this is number 1. So you can see here that is marked. Now the way I did that is I ran a line down the outside of that to the housing so that I could use a straight edge to line that up. Now the third test over here is you'll see I've got a screwdriver stuck down into cylinder number 1. You remove the spark plug, put a very long shafted screwdriver in there, and as you turn the crank, you watch the screwdriver move up. When the screwdriver reaches its apex before it starts dropping again, that's top dead center. So there's a couple different ways to find it. Now that we've got the engine lined up to top dead center, we've got the extraneous pieces removed, we're going to start diving into the next section, which is removing the timing belt covers, removing the timing belts, then finally we will actually get to the water pump. So after an excessive amount of time, we got the crank bolt loose. This is probably going to be the biggest challenge for you on this particular project. Down here you can see the crank pulley and the crank bolt. It gets mounted right here on the side of the car. Now the deal is that there are two ways to do this. There's an OEM factory tool, which if you have, makes this easier. It holds the pulley in place for you while you do it. If you don't have the OEM factory tool, there is two pieces down by the transmission you need to remove to expose the fly ring. The ring gear. One of those is a solid mount that goes around the shift cable. The other one is a very thin metal piece that just simply exposes it. You need to have two people to do this. One person down there busting their butts, getting the ring gear to stop from moving. The other one up here, you can see I've got an impact wrench, an excessively long, this is a 15-inch, half-inch extension.
25.
And then I've got a 24-inch breaker bar. Now what we had to do was we had to take a jack stand, position it so that we could get this in there. And then once it was in there, with the other person locking the flywheel in place, not only use the breaker bar, but also use a significantly long cheater bar as well. This happens to be off my jack. Even with all of that, now to give you an idea of scale, we originally tried by half-inch drive impact wrench to get it loose and it wouldn't do it. So it's got to be a few hundred pounds, like north of 400 or 500 pounds of torque on that particular crank bolt. The final thing that we did that was able to knock it loose, regular penetrating oil won't do it. What you'll need to do is you'll make up your own weasel pea. Basically what this is a 50-50 mix of ATF and acetone. Best known rust cutter bolt undoer solution you can make, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper than the fancy Croil and all that other junk. But after we'd sprayed that on there, let it set for 20 minutes, utilizing this setup and the breaker bar and a lot of sweat, we are able to bust it loose. Once you bust that bolt loose, remember to keep it at top dead center. Once that bolt is out, you then have to remove the crank gear, or the crank pulley. Now ours came off very easily. You may need to use a crank puller to do it. Basically any standard crank puller will enable you to pull that out. So now that we've got this off, that is the last piece of that needs to be removed before we can get into the timing. So basically all the work we've done so far is simply to get access to where we need to work. So the next stage, get the timing cover off, and we will start actually working on the pieces that we need to swap out. Okay, so after we got the crank pulley off, the next thing to do is start getting into the timing cover. So the first thing you need to do is remove the dipstick. So there is a single 10mm bolt that holds this down here, and then once you get that loose, you simply rotate it and lift it out. The next thing you need to do is remove the timing cover itself. So the timing cover is a two-piece assembly. The fun part is, if you look at it, the top and the bottom thread together. So there are a number of different screws on here. Now, there may be different length screws, so you never know when removing one of these unless, of course, you removed one before. So basically what I always do is I make tracing in roughly the same shape as what I'm removing, and then everywhere where I remove a bolt, I punch a hole in and I put the bolt there. So now I know, for example, exactly where every one of these bolts goes when I reassemble this. So in this particular case, I didn't see anything that really indicated there were different lengths, but it's always good to know that. This is a bit of a pain in the butt to wiggle off. What we found worked easiest is you wiggle the down piece down and around, and then you can pull the upper piece out, creep it out, and lift it up. So with that out, I forgot one thing to tell you. Before we did that, we removed the motor mount. Basically, 2 bolts here, 1 bolt runs through it, and then you've got a ground strap that jumpers from the engine to the chassis. It hooks on here with a 10mm bolt. That comes out. It gives you access to the assembly. Now, what I've done is there are actually two belts down here. And what I've done is on every belt where it meets a sprocket of any sort, you'll see a white mark. That's a little bit of whiteout. Whether we're replacing it or not, I do it by default on everything. That way, when I do go back in to line things back up again, it's a heck of a lot easier. So even though we've got this at top dead center, we've now got marks on all the belts to make sure that we've got all the pulley alignments and everything set for when this goes back together. Now, yes, we are going to replace the timing belt, but if nothing else, we can match up marks from belt to belt. So the next thing that we got to go in and do is remove the belt assemblies from here to get access to the water pump, which is down here. We can actually finally see the water pump. If you look straight down there at that pulley right there is the front side of the water pump. So we're going to go ahead and remove all the tensioner stuff, remove the belts, get all of that out of the way so we can access the water pump and actually get that replaced. Hey folks, so the Hondas always catch me by surprise. So I thought I had everything off. We didn't have everything off. So this little fellow here bolts into the side of the block, and it's the mounting point for the motor mount that goes into the side of the chassis. That had to come out to get the water pump off. This plastic piece is another timing cover piece that goes up behind the cam pulley. Have to take both of those off to get into there. And finally, to get to 2 of the bolts at the bottom of the water pump, you need to remove the tensioner off there. So got all of those bits off. We finally got the water pump off. Now I want to show you what the water pump looks like. Oh, well, one other thing I want to mention before I do that. So just like we did with the timing cover, we made a tracing of the water pump and put all the bolts in the appropriate places. You'll see there's one that's open. There's no actual bolt there. That's the mounting bolt for the timing cover right there. Now, here is the water pump we removed. What you want to look at is basically what's happened over the years is that the gasket's gone. Now, if you look particularly up here, you can see where it's seeped out and scorched against the block. So it's been slowly leaking out through this gap over time down the back of the motor, and it's got a corrosion trail back there. So now that we've got this out, what we did as well, if you look down there, is all around the mounting point of the water pump, we scraped it all off, cleaned it up, and so it's ready to go. Now the other thing is that when you do remove the water pump, it will dump coolant, so make sure you've got a catch tray underneath. But now that we've got it all cleaned up, what we're going to do is we're going to take our new water pump, which I put right here. Now what you want to do, the gasket's still in the box, but what you always want to do is you want to compare your parts and make sure they look the same. So you can see that these look pretty much identical. I don't see any differences. So basically we are all set with this. We're going to put the gasket in here, bolt it all back up, and at this point I have to say that basically installation is the reverse of disassembly. I know people hate to hear that sort of thing, but with the amount of work we've got to do here, basically it's the same steps we did before. Bolt up the water pump, the accessories that we just removed need to be put back on. Then once that's on, you need to get the belts and your timing set, which is why we had all the marks on the pulleys. You get the belts on, you get the timing covers back on. Once you've got that in there, you got to put the crank pulley back on. And then beyond that, it's putting that belt on, putting the alternator back in, putting the power steering pump back in, and basically tidying up after yourself when you're done. So at this stage of the game, I'm going to say bye because we have a lot of assembly left to do. But until next time, happy motoring. The one final caveat I'll put out there is, as you've seen, this is not a simple job. So if you're a novice mechanic, this should scare you. If this scares you, take your car to the dealership, because it's very easy to destroy your engine if you do this the wrong way. At any rate, talk to you later. Bye.